Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to bring to order the meeting of the Council Infrastructure Committee for July 19th. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight, 2 for information and 1 for action. We're going to start right up with the update on Gilman Boulevard from Brianne Ross.
Great, thanks. Brianne Ross, Senior Transportation Engineer for Public Works Engineering and the Project Manager for our Gilman project. So I came to you all in April and kind of gave you an update of the initial staff kickoff meeting, our project process and schedule. And since then, I've been very busy meeting with the public, and so I wanted to come tonight to give you guys another update on what we've heard so far. So, that being said, we'll talk a little bit about process, where we're at. We've had an online survey that's been open. We've also had business stakeholder workshops and community workshops. And then we'll get into the very initial preliminary community feedback that we've started to hear. So our project is Gilman from SR 900 to, from, I was going to say Newport, from SR 900 or 17th to Front Street. And this has kind of some of the highlights that we've been looking at with the bus stops are those little ovals. We've got future roadway connections, transit center, and then the major shopping centers, as well as making sure that we're taking into account our natural features. So currently we've just finished task 3, or our community vision and framework, and we're developing that initial framework now and working towards bringing that to the Parks Board, the EVC, and PPC in the fall after we get that written, and then back to a council workshop in January. And wanted to note that next year is when we would be putting lines on the paper, so to speak, and really coming up with a concept, and that the framework this year is really talking about project goals and community vision. And we would anticipate that implementation and construction be something that's likely a phased approach and be joint between properties that might develop, and as well as potentially some CIP projects that would come out of the study. So first I want to talk to you about our online survey. It just closed Friday. So we closed with about over 750 responses, which is, we're really excited about that response rate. In addition to our typical social media efforts, we visited 280 businesses in person to talk about the survey, as well as the project, as well as advertising our business workshops. It's been in the chamber newsletter every month, and in a couple different mayor's reports at full council meetings. And then there's been presentations introducing the project to EVC, PPC, Park Board, DIA, and the Chamber. And then we also went out to the Tibbetts Park and Ride and distributed about 300 flyers that advertised our survey, as well as the open house. And the survey itself actually advertised our community workshop and our website. So kind of the record of efforts we've been working on so far. So all the survey, the data that you're going to see in the presentation is as of July 1st, not when it closed, which was July 13th. We didn't have a chance to pull it again. But this should give you guys kind of that initial flavor of what we're seeing. Since this was pulled, we had about 100 more additional responses than what you're seeing here, but you can start to see some trends. So we did hear from residents all over the city. And we also heard from a lot of people that worked along Gilman, which was important to us. And some sample comments are included here. A lot of comments about pedestrian crossing and the environment that's out there, and also a lot of comments about the 3 trails crossing in that intersection, which is not really surprising. We also had our business stakeholder workshops in June, and There we had 2 days, and we had several sessions scheduled throughout the day, as well as a couple different drop-in times that people could come in and talk to us. We had a brief presentation and then a lot of good conversation around that. In general, key messages that we heard is that currently, the way that Gilman operates today is there's a priority towards cars. There was a lot of conversation of where bikes belong and how that fits in with the future of Gilman. Also had some interesting conversations about like a potential people mover. There's a lot of people that would like to park and walk or get from destination to destination. That came out again in other conversations with maybe that's like a shuttle or a rapid ride transit something, but there's a lot of desire for trying to break up this longer corridor. Certainly a priority for commercial destination, wanting safety to be a priority for this project, and a lot of conversations about storefront and signage visibility as well. Also, certainly a request for continued coordination with property owners, which we intend to do. They were appreciative of this opportunity and wanted to make sure to capitalize on that again in the future. The other thing that we kind of heard was that it's hard to picture a future Gilman, 20 years out, or what that might look like with when Sound Transit does come to the area and with a denser property development. So that was also a big topic of conversation. We also had our community workshop last week. I will note there was about a day and a half between the workshop and when this was published. So our findings, I suppose, or what we heard from the workshop might not be as polished as it might be in the future presentations. But we, again, had a little brief presentation and then sat down, broke into groups, and had some exercises to talk about overall project goals, and then also to talk about these main topics that have been reoccurring in our conversations around Gilman. And then afterwards, each group reported back out to the group as a whole. And what we heard were a lot of conversations. And then as they were reporting out, we did another kind of graphic recording, which is what you see, which is a little bit rough here up on the board. But a lot of talk about trying to park once and walk. A lot of talk about signature streets. It was interesting, one group talked about how the ditch that is currently near Target is an amenity and should be celebrated and enhanced. Another group talked about how that's a constraint and it should be paved over. And then also a lot of talk about interim and long-term solutions and what does the in-between phase look like as we're trying to strive to our ultimate vision. Ultimately came to a good conclusion that walking is important and should not be ignored on this corridor. Also that biking is important to some, and that there are those out there that actually select the businesses that they go to on Gilman based on how easy they are to get to by bike. Looking at the different grocery store options available, there are some that are favored over others based on their bike ability. Also talked about raising transit as a specific priority and building people-oriented places. So these were all common themes and support what we've heard in the survey, which we'll get into. So this is kind of what we've started to hear out of the survey, the business workshops, and the community workshop. So starting to hear about some goals for this project. Certainly some emphasis on economic development and the economic vitality of the area, as well as the natural environment, creating a multimodal street, a safe street, a walkable street. And this is, again, as of July 1st, the support out of the online survey for goals that were identified through the online survey. So you can see there's a lot of support for enhancing the natural environment, planning for that future light rail station, and supporting the economic development. I do think that there was potential for confusion about maybe what a signature street means. And so I wanted to take a quick opportunity to kind of elaborate on that. And so, when we talk about a signature street, we're really talking about designing a street and incorporating various streetscape elements, including landscaping, to convey and celebrate what the street can be an opportunity and a place that's more than just the function of its mobility. So it's not just a street for cars, it's not just a street for people, but it's how can you create a unique place that celebrates additional uses. And so that can be done using specific special paving materials. It can be done with landscaping. It can be done with selecting a unique light fixture or bench or trash can that's carried throughout the corridor. And typically it's kind of a combination of all of those things, which we would look to see to create that signature street, that unique place that sets Gilman apart from a different street within our city. In our business stakeholder workshops, we had a lot of great conversation about project goals and added that the street segments should be customizable. It's not necessarily one uniform solution for the whole corridor from SR 900 to Front Street, that there might be like 3 different segments, roughly, that each of those operate differently and should be treated differently. And while we want to have a unique or a cohesive feel of the corridor, also recognizing that the needs of different areas are different. And also making sure that we're building an implementable plan. Out of the community workshop, we also talked about that Park Once idea and being transit oriented, and then creating a signature or aesthetic street. So, our emerging goals, a little bit of a preview of what we're hearing out of the survey. And there's a lot of support for maintaining our economic vitality in this area. This is a successful business area, and it's not like we're trying to do a streetscape project to revitalize an area. So we want to make sure that we keep what's working and improve upon what we can. The most support for signal timing. And you can see that people identified, these are pins that people dropped throughout the survey. People identified a lot of opportunity for walking improvements throughout the corridor. And you'll see that pretty consistently with all the different topics that are addressed. And we're starting to see a lot of support for safety improvements with that walking corridor, with the increased separation from traffic, enhanced crosswalks, and safer driveway crossings. Also seeing a lot of support for lighting and street trees and planting areas. And then for our biking improvements, this is also kind of consistent with what we've heard in our workshops, is that there's some that biking is really important to people, and to have bike facilities on Gilman is really important. There's other people that think that maybe bikes should belong on a different street or a parallel street, or maybe we should be improving those connections to the regional trails that we already have. So this is something that we've heard out of everything so far, and has been an ongoing conversation about how to make a complete street, and including biking. This question's unique in that every other question they got to pick however many they wanted to pick throughout the survey. This one they got to pick one, but we can certainly see that there's support for an off-road bike facility versus something that might be mixed with traffic. And then transit improvements. Some business owners acknowledged the importance of the bus routes on Gilman, because they have employees that utilize that to get to work. And we can see that there's a desire to improve the existing stops that we have. And as we talked about actually as well, making sure that we're accommodating future light rail. And then a lot of support for our natural environment and their improvements. The linear park is something that came out of the green necklace work that was done recently. And so there's certainly support for that as well. Again, that might be something when we say linear park that could get a little bit lost in translation. So that's something else that we're looking at. So, like I said, our survey closed on Friday, so we're now pulling out all the complete data from that and gonna start to develop our corridor framework and then take that framework on a roadshow. So, with that, any questions?
More of a topic of conversation, but I am interested in the edible landscaping that's there now. I think it goes along a lot of the distance of this corridor. And so my personal opinion of it is that it's really interesting. I know that it sort of does tie in with the history of agriculture in the area, and that was the original idea. And I was thinking about it also with this study, that there could be opportunities for better signage, because I think a lot of people don't know that it's there or don't know that they are invited to take fruit from the edible landscape. And so I think there's some opportunities for that. And so I just wondered if you had considered it, if you had any thoughts about that and where that was going.
Yeah, so that's been an ongoing topic of conversation as well. It came up a lot in our business workshops. A lot of the property owners are not actually in favor of the edible landscape due to the maintenance and kind of sanitary issues that it brings. And we've also talked a lot with our Parks Department, and our Parks Department's opinion is that those trees are often, a lot of them are at the end of their lifespan and not in the best health. And being on Gilman with a high volume of traffic and high speed of traffic and the smog from I-90, that maybe that's not the best location for the edible landscape, and that looking at a road that, or looking at a different location that had a potentially lower vehicle volume, lower speeds, made it easier to maintain, safer for users to utilize, it might be a different opportunity for that.
Okay. I think also there might be opportunities for using that as part of the signature street, but I know that would be one of the things that would be a conversation with the business owners. So
Yeah.
and then the other thing I was thinking about was historical preservation or sort of enhancement of opportunities to know about the history of the area. There's Gilman Village, there's other historical architecture kind of around the area, and then also the trolley stop, that there isn't a structure there, but if you go on the trolley, they have a picture of eventually there is a vision for having a trolley stop there. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the historical aspects of Gilman and the plan for Gilman Boulevard, taking into account those things.
Yeah, so the Gilman Boulevard study is really focusing more within the right-of-way itself and not really looking at the adjacent land uses or the codes or the existing facilities or potential redevelopment of facilities that are out there. That being said, there has been conversations about like wayfinding signs and things like that. Of course, businesses are really interested in the wayfinding sign idea, as well as connections to the trail system and using wayfinding for that. So I think there's certainly opportunity to look at how signage can help within our roadway, help users be more knowledgeable or experience the historical buildings, but we're not specifically looking at those buildings with this project.
So, and I just to add to that, so Brianne's right, the focus of this effort, the initial effort on Gilman, is the corridor and looking at what opportunities we have within the right-of-way, but we realize that, and what's really kind of cool and important about Gilman is that it's not a separate road with separate land use adjacent to it. We know that those fit together and work together, can work together, probably work together better than they are working now. And so the exciting part of this initial work and focusing on the street and streetscape is that it gives us opportunities to then see how that street connects to the adjacent land use and supports non-motorized uses and all that. So so we're not we're recognizing that there's land use and significant and important land use adjacent to the corridor. And that's, I think we have some real opportunities going forward to think about tying all that together. So it's a really good point, and I'd say more to come on that as we move further along in this work.
Thank you for all, it looks like a really great public input way to deal with this and really searching out and get folks involved. Thank you for that. I think it is a main economic driver of this city, definitely business-wise, and reaching out to the business. You said you did that directly to them. That was great. Thank you very much. I didn't quite hear how enthusiastic would you say overall businesses are looking at this? I didn't quite hear that, like saying, hey, this would be a good opportunity for their business, or some of them kind of thinking, well, this may cost me in redevelopment and those kinds of things as well, trading those things off. How do you think the businesses are looking at this in general?
Yeah, so it's certainly a mixed reaction. There are those business owners that maybe sell large items that, don't really think that Gilman needs to be a walkable or bikeable corridor, because they look at it, well, someone's not going to come into my store, buy a big item, and walk away. So there's certainly a variety of responses. We did hear a lot of enthusiasm for these improvements, and everybody that came in that we talked to talked about the various safety concerns along Gilman and really looking for a solution to that, which is a big priority for this project. But also looking at, how does this corridor transform in the future and utilize a multimodal corridor to help those businesses as well as help the people get around. So there certainly is, though, that concern of making sure that it's not this huge undertaking, this big dream that's hard to implement. That's why that implementable became one of those goals. It's because they certainly don't want something that's going to be too much for them to undertake. That being said, they all know that should the time come where they redevelop, they have to do their property frontage improvements, and so that doesn't change. So it's just how involved are those improvements.
And just to add, one thing that we do hear consistently from developers in the business community is the importance of some degree of certainty and knowing where we're going as a community. And so I think this, we're not there yet on Gilman. We're headed that way, but I think we all benefit. The community benefits from knowing where we're headed on Gilman. The business community benefits as developments come in, or even if they don't redevelop, they know where we're headed on this. So I think it's good for everyone to understand what the future is likely to look like and get everyone all on the same page.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because as we talked about the frontage improvements, we discussed how Gilman doesn't have a corridor plan right now, which is why we're here doing what we're doing. And so there is that level of uncertainty. And so they do absolutely appreciate having this process to determine what that is and having that be a reliable thing going forward as they choose to look at their property in the future.
And one last question. There's a stretch there on the north end of Gilman where there's some pretty narrow strips of land that are pretty much unusable between I-90 and Gilman, and those are they washed out right away? Are they owned by the city? And how do we figure on that? Because right now they're kind of a bit of a park maintenance issue, I imagine, on lawn and that kind of stuff, and not usable. So that there's a fair amount of that. What's your thoughts towards that?
Right. So I think that and you're exactly right, that when we talk about how this is going to be something that will be likely implemented by developers as well as the city, those particular areas are somewhere we know developers are not going to come in and redevelop and do their frontage improvements. So those might be opportunities for the city to come in and start the implementation or tie into someone else's frontage improvements to finish out those the corridor as a whole. There was a lot of conversation about that as an opportunity to potentially like put up a sound wall and make some sort of a park or something in our community workshop. So trying to maybe improve that space and make it more of a people-oriented space, because while there's benches and some kind of grassy area there now, it's also right next to I-90 and pretty loud, so that's not something that's maybe as pleasant as it could be. So there's certainly opportunity for improvement there.
Thank you. Anything else? And I guess thank you very much for keeping us updated. Appreciate that. And we'll just do a chance for public comment on this project at all.
Go back to thinking of Bellevue Way being when I worked at the Safeway there wasn't one building higher than 1 story on all of Bellevue Way. And what will happen here as things approach the road and things change. There is some interesting green spots that are too narrow, that are public, that'll give something more than a Bellevue Way look. I've never understood how we would connect 12th going across the freeway, or why we would want to do that. It seems if we're going to be on sound transit, it seems we got to be looking at that being in the I-90 corridor somewhere midstream of Gilman and on a lid situation. It seems like we'll be not going to be feeding sound transit with cars. We're going to feed it with bikes and shuttles and walking, and see it hopefully work that way. Where are we going to park all these cars that potentially could be coming to a stop there is something we got to think a lot more about. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave.
Do I need to give my name? Geraldine Carey, 955 17th Avenue, Northwest Issaquah. I think this is probably a good idea, but my concern is there's not much land between Squawk Mountain and Lake Sammamish, and how many roads go through to Seattle? I mean, you've got 54th or Lake Sammamish, you've got I-90, and you've got Gilman, and you've got Newport Way. And when you talk about taking a major east-west corridor and making it into a slow place, a place where people can walk and bike, I understand that's really important, but traffic is just going to get worse. And if you force people off of Gilman onto Newport Way or onto the road north of, I can't remember, West Lake Sammamish Parkway, and on I-90, it's going to make it really hard for people to get east and west. And I think the thing you are forgetting about is we need roads. I'm not real fond of everybody getting in the cars, but that's the reality. And if you're going to take these people off of the roads, where are they going to go except crowd other roads? So I hope you take that into consideration when you talk about slowing down traffic, making it more of a place to sit and daydream and shop and things. It's a major road in Issaquah, and it needs to stay that way. As much as we'd like to, do something and make it a signature street, we need to remember to keep traffic flowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine. All right. We'll close that item. Next item is AB 7641, Newport Way Tibbetts Creek Bridge Reinforcement Project. This is looking for action, and it'll be presented by Sheldon Lynn, I believe.
Yes, thank you. Give me a moment to get it up on the screen, please. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm scrolling past the text to the graphic to show the location, and I'll speak to the whole thing. So, thank you. The agenda bill in front of the council requests consideration for a budget authorization of $175,000 for reinforcing the current bridge structure that is on Newport Way that crosses Tibbetts Creek. In addition, it also requests council's authorization to execute design and construction contracts appropriately to perform the work so they can get done before this fall. The Executive Office, Public Works Operations, Eastside Fire and Rescue, Parks Department, as well as the Engineering Department believe the prudent course of action here is to reinforce the bridge structure now. The bridge is located on the map on the screen at the circle there. It's just west of the intersection of 900 and Newport Way. As a matter of fact, it's very close to Miss Carey's driveway. The bridge itself was built in 2001. It's 17 years old. It's inspected every 2 years in accordance with the federal rules, and the last inspection done was in September of 2017. No damage has ever been observed to that structure in any of the inspections. The bridge is safe, and it's not damaged in any way. The only change that we've had has been a change in the calculation of how the load limits are calculated. That change was in response to the Federal Highway Administration changing the way that all agencies must calculate their load ratings for any bridge. The new calculations that were recently completed show that the bridge should be reinforced or posted with load limits. The reinforcement of the bridge would be a permanent reinforcement and will not be affected by the planned future Newport Way 54th to SR 900 road project. Should the structure or bridge require widening as part of the road project, then extensions would be added without removing the current structure. Posting the load limits restricts all vehicles that exceed the load limits. Users of the bridge include fire trucks, city snowplows, city Vector trucks, which are used to clean storm systems and sanitary sewer mains, Public Works Operations and Parks trucks that transport materials and heavy equipment, and other heavy vehicles used for local deliveries. That includes construction vehicles. The administration recommends that the council authorize the expenditure of the $175,000 by directing the finance director to include it in a future budget amendment and authorizing the execution of design and construction contracts to perform the work. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I have questions.
Good.
So Sheldon, the agenda bill doesn't contain any details about the federal regulations and when those changed, or what any of the deadlines were for us to do the calculations under the new requirements, or what the requirements are for when you have to reinforce or post. And I'm asking because it seems like a fairly tight deadline here that you're asking for. And so I'm just a little bit concerned that we're being asked for the latter part of July for a contract to be executed quickly so the design can be done by the end of August, when I believe these new legal requirements were in place a few years ago. And so I'm just wanting to know if you can expand on that, and wondering why all of that information wasn't in the agenda bill.
Yeah, I apologize for that information not being in the agenda bill. The city, I actually just went through my email history and so forth to find out when we found out about it. And apparently WashDOT had sent a letter out in 2014, which we don't recall ever receiving and didn't know about this. We actually found out about it as we were digging into the issue because we had heard rumors that other agencies were doing this. And I got an email from King County Roads Division with the attached letter from WashDOT in November of 2017. And we immediately moved on it to retain a consultant to do the load rating calculations as appropriate. And there's two groups, according to the FHWA memo that was attached to the WashDOT letter. And group one, about half of our bridges qualified for, and the deadline for doing those calculations was the end of 2017. We finished in early 2018. And when done, we believe that the bridge could have been reinforced as part of the larger Newport Way project, but that project is a few years out yet, and there are impacts to having it posted. You have a puzzled look, I'm sorry.
Sure. So what's the requirement for posting, the legal requirement for posting in terms of if you're not going to reinforce, do you have to post it immediately? Is that what the regulation says?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I received an email from WashDOT about a month ago asking when we were going to post it, because they're going, you've got to post it. And in conversations with WashDOT, they said that if we were able to move and get this done in the near term, they wouldn't require us to post it. Because this is a new regulation, new twist, a lot of agencies are having the same difficulties. They want to be responsive, but then posting really creates some issues with the transportation system and emergency vehicles, operations, things like that, from all the users.
It seems like there's going to be the same issues for, I mean, most bridges are going to have that fish window issue. I don't know, I'm just.
We analyzed about half of our bridges because they fell in group one.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only bridge that has the issue. And different areas of the nation have different requirements for fish. We have a salmon spawning stream that has endangered species in it. It's probably a little different than a stream that's in the middle of the state of Washington.
When did we find out that we may need to reinforce this?
When we got the memo from the consultant in spring of this year.
I had some questions to you in an email, and so thank you for answering those. I think I guess my biggest question is, it seems like to me there should be some, emergency vehicles don't follow the same driving traffic laws as other vehicles, and so I wonder why there isn't some way to post this for, say, construction vehicles. And I know that you also spoke to that the city can direct construction vehicles other ways, but I just wonder why there isn't some way to have exceptions or some way to enforce that for construction vehicles specifically, which I know is a big issue.
You mean for emergency vehicles?
Yeah, to allow
construction vehicles.
Right, to allow emergency vehicles, but to prohibit construction vehicles.
Well, if you post it and you accept the construction vehicles, you still have your other impacts associated with your operations departments, your parks departments, and the like. And the aspect of posting with an exception for emergency vehicles, the emergency personnel still need to feel comfortable that they can go over that bridge. They're going to have a tendency to not go over the bridge if it's posted as a regulatory post, even if it says except emergency vehicles, because they're over the load limit. If they feel like they have to, they probably will, but they're going to be reticent to do that.
So is one option to post accepting emergency vehicles?
I wouldn't recommend it.
But that wasn't.
I guess you could, but the emergency vehicles will probably bypass it then and still go the long way around. In our conversations with EFR, they indicated that if the bridge was posted, they'd go around. And they know that they can violate laws and things like that. It's not a law thing. They just feel like they should go around.
And I also had a question about the Newport Way. It's going to be remodeled, or work is going to be done on it, but that work doesn't, you said that work doesn't impact this, or is not expected
No.
to impact this?
It will not remove or replace this structure. The structure will remain in place.
Is that all questions?
Not necessarily.
Well, then ask some more.
Well,
Go ahead.
I don't have any this second, but
Oh, okay.
that doesn't mean that I might
Okay.
not have some other ones.
All right. I'll just say, it seems to me like we, the city, got caught off guard with this somehow or other, because this is a really quick action that came about, and however that happened. My concern is that doing something now, there was some mention of doing that totally from within the culvert, so it's not outside the roadbed, so it would not affect traffic. But our fish window is coming up very quickly, so I don't know how you could get anything contracted and done before our fish window opens up officially. So I'm wondering about that.
Good questions. I've had conversations with the Fisheries Management Office here that would issue the HPA, and they said that they would be able to work with us to extend the fish window if necessary through about the end of October. The contract that we've been working on with David Evans and Associates, who's the bridge engineer that actually did the structural load calculations, they have very tight turnarounds for their plan specifications and ad ready set. And we can move quickly with all of this. And the HPA, in my conversations with the manager that would be issuing the permit, said that they can expedite the permit for us and turn it around in 1 to 2 weeks. So it's tight, yes, but the work is relatively simple and straightforward as well. As you mentioned, it's on the underside of the culvert, so there's limited or no traffic impacts. And what it is, based on the conversation that I had with the engineer, is it's a highly reinforced epoxy layer that gets put on the underside of the top slab of the bridge. So in other words, inside the culvert or bridge, on the top of it, they highly reinforce a thin layer of epoxy to strengthen the slab up on top. And so it should be a quick construction time frame. And Fisheries is willing to work with us. I've had those conversations, and they're very positive with us.
When you say they're positive, but basically you'll be working in the fish window is what they're saying, because you're saying in October's fish window.
We have to be careful about it, and they said that, and so yes, but we think we can get it done.
For questions for a minute. So what I heard you say is that we could post accepting emergency vehicles, but EFR said they would still go around?
When we talked with EFR, we talked about posting the load limits, and they said if we posted the load limits, they would go around. We did not have specific conversations about saying accepting emergency vehicles. However, if they're going to go around with it normally posted, chances are they're going to go around otherwise as well.
Do we have some sort of official position from them, like documented?
We do not have a document.
No?
In my conversations with Emily via voicemail, she actually said that EFR supported doing the reinforcement now.
You want to have some public comment on this?
Sure.
All right, public comment time.
You know, on my last comments, I didn't say how well the city had done about getting all the comments about going out and outreach and getting all these comments about Newport and all of that part. And I think part of this is it comes across as Band-Aids, I don't think even people have thought that this work was going to survive a widening of the road or future work there. So it's better. It's almost, if it had been not just a repair, but a reinforcement or something more positive than repair. Just repair does not give the right sound to what's happening here. I mean, we're gluing this bridge together better, right? That's what it sounds like with the epoxy, and it's going to make quite a difference. I don't know what choice you have other than going through. This is one of those places as a council member you don't like to be in, but there's not a lot of flexibility here, I'm afraid. It at least won't interfere with traffic that much. There'll be lots of activity on the sides, but I think, you know, a lot of us thought they were going to be doing all kinds of having to tear into the roadway and that kind of thing, and there was only a Band-Aid and wasn't going to be for the long term. But apparently we can expand that road width, and this will stay in place, and it's not going to be a tear out. So it's sounding better after I got more information. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I wrote a letter to the officials, and I said I support this project if it's not a temporary fix, and if the bridge is going to be there for a lot longer than a couple years, then I support the project. But I also want to add a comment. My daughter is a firefighter. I have 2 firefighters living in the house, and in talking with them about what they do when a road is closed because of the load limit, the general feeling was East Side Fire and Rescue would not respond to anything west of SR 900, that they would contract with Lakemont Fire Department to come down to service so that the emergency vehicles did not have to go all the way to Lakemont, turn around and come all the way back to Summerhill. I mean, that was a concern of mine, was that, you know, people's lives would be at risk. But they said there are bridges in Carnation and there are bridges in other places that are closed to fire trucks because of some sort of damage. And then the closest other fire department covers the emergency. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. They don't have to go, you know, all the way 2.5 miles down to Lakemont and then turn around and come back to the person who lives closest to the bridge. Unfortunately, I'm on the east side, so I'm okay, but you know, I mean, that's not a concern of mine. But I just want, you know, my thing is the use of funds long term. I don't want something to be spent short term. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine. Any more questions for us, or you want to start discussion? All right, discussion.
Go ahead.
Well, I think it would be good to know, it sounds like we don't know if they would, we don't know if the emergency vehicles would actually be okay with going over the bridge if it was posted a load limit other than emergency vehicles, so that would be good to know. I think if it is the case that they are hesitant or that they would be less likely to use that road in the case of emergency, then I think we, you know, that really seriously would limit the option that I would consider. But it wasn't clear to me that was the case, since that specifically wasn't asked. And then other than that, I appreciated the public comment about this being long-term. I think there's continuing construction in this area and continuing need for a bridge to get there, more and more people in that area, and they're going to need to use that road as well. And so I think if it is a long-term investment in the bridge functioning better, then that would be a good thing. My thoughts.
Member Goodman?
Go ahead.
Thoughts, discussion? No?
Yeah, I might have some. Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, well, it is strange that we get caught this short in such a short time period. When, you know, with change of regulations, that somehow that we missed that. That bothers me, that we get there and all of a sudden we have to do an emergency fix. To me, weight is weight. There's no such thing as a good weight or a bad weight. If a truck weighs so much, it weighs so much. A bridge doesn't care if it's carrying water or concrete. So if you're going to post something, to me, it's weight. If you allow things going that you say are unsafe and you expect things to go over that in an unsafe manner, that's just not a way to run business for me. So that, you know, because bridge doesn't care. So that doesn't appear to be an option for as far as I'm concerned with emergency vehicles. And if they had to contract out from the other side, then our firefighters or our fire department is paying other folks to come somewhere else to come service us, and that's long range. That's not a good idea. That's a temporary thing. So I don't like that business at all. As long as we can use this for long term. I mean, I say it is a long term fix. I crawled under there myself a little bit today and looked at stuff, and there was a little bit of strange construction material I asked Sheldon about that I didn't quite understand. I don't know what some of the wiring is down there, but we'll find out. You'll take a look here shortly and let me know on that. But if this is what we got to do, we got to do. So I don't, you know, if we need to widen it, they say we have the ability to do that. It's not lost. It's only a 17-year-old bridge. If bridges should last a little longer than that. You know, I don't like to all of a sudden spend extra money that we weren't planning on, but I don't know what else to do.
So there just isn't enough information in this agenda bill for me to support it. I'm not, I know we had some additional information. I think all of the information, what I would like to know is the who, what, where, when, why, how. And that's not in here. There was a change. We did something, and now we have to do something within 6 weeks. And I don't like that. And I would like much more information about how we got here and why this absolutely has to be done and why we don't have any other options. Because I'm just not persuaded, and I don't like being put into a position where we have an extremely thin agenda bill, and our backs are up against the wall and we have to make a decision because everybody else is telling us that we have to. So if we need to make a recommendation to the council to support this, then I can't support that tonight. If it does come to the full council and we have much more information, then I may be able to do that.
Remember.
One thing that I read in the emails, but I think isn't as clear in the agenda bill, is that my understanding anyway is that the bridge is safe. It's safe for these vehicles to be going over, so it isn't actually a safety concern. Because to your point, if there was a concern about the vehicles going over, then or a certain amount of weight, that would be obviously then need to block it off and do the fix immediately. So my understanding from the emails was that it's not an immediate safety concern. It's more of the calculation and the update, and for the long term, we would need to make these changes or post a certain way. And then so my thinking on the emergency vehicles, again, if it were that they were unsafe to be, a certain amount of weight was unsafe to be going over the bridge, then absolutely not. But my understanding was that that it also just having these vehicles go over, it increases the rate of deterioration of the bridge. And so this could be a way to, if you have less of these heavy vehicles going over, but you do allow emergency vehicles, that would decrease the rate of deterioration of the bridge, because lots of activity on the bridge increases that.
You're correct. The bridge is safe. It hasn't been damaged over the years of use by heavy vehicles. The limiting it and allowing only the emergency vehicles, again, hearing Ms. Carey and our conversations with Eastside Fire and Rescue, it sounds like they would contract with an adjoining fire agency to respond. The other impact is to your operational costs and to your levels of service when it comes to snow removal, stormwater, sewer services, and things like that. If something's happening in those areas, the Public Works Operations Department is not going to be able to drive over that bridge. They're going to have to go down I-90 and come all the way back. That affects their snow route, their responses to emergencies in the sewer, stormwater, and things like that. So yes, emergency vehicles, they may decide to go ahead and cross, but it sounds like they're not going to. They're going to contract, or they're just going to go around. But you're still impacting your own operations as well. As I described, those are users of the bridge.
So, Sheldon, in order for me to feel more comfortable with this, this is the information I would want to see. I would want to know more details about the new federal regulations that apparently came out several years ago. I would want to see WashDOT's position and its deadline for posting. If they're sending us information that is requiring us to post immediately and they're putting pressure on us, I want to see that, and what their, maybe how that relates to FHWA, and I don't know what that relationship is between WashDOT and FHWA on Newport Way. I need to know more about that. I want to know Ever's position. I want a more thorough presentation of our options, and I'd like to see the results of the bridge analysis. And it may be technical, I totally get that, but I just, we're just getting even a lot of information from you tonight that really all should be in the agenda bill. And maybe it seems like a no-brainer to you because that's your job, and but you just know way more about this, either in emails and paperwork or in your head, than we do. And so that's the trouble I'm having. That it's just, you really need to do it, and you really need to do it now because there are regulations, and that's just not enough for me.
One thing that I would like more information on would be about the fish window. It says that it can be extended to October, but it also talks about the need for it to occur during a certain temperature range and how it's temperature dependent. And so that would also be good to know, because this is potentially going to, if this were to occur, it would potentially occur right alongside this fish window. And I think the fish window is a biological reality. Even if they're saying, we can adjust it later, it probably does start to affect, or your likelihood of affecting fish starts increasing. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
I would tend to agree with the additional information that's requested. I feel a little backed into a corner here a little bit because of the situation. I would go ahead with that because of that, and some trust that that's all there, but it would be really nice, I think, to bring all that to the council when it comes to council, assuming we say come forward on the 6th, that those questions that have been asked could be added to the agenda bill. Things such as, use words posted. Well, to me, posting means a lot of different things. Is that 20,000 pounds, 30,000 pounds? I mean, a whole different array. So what would that rating be? I would add that question there. And the other question I ask is kind of getting a conflicting message here. So when you say a bridge is safe, it hasn't been damaged. I understand that it hasn't been damaged. And different calculations say it can carry X weight versus Y weight. There's been no damage to occur, so the structure's still intact as it was. But if a system's in place that this is now the way we're doing all bridges, this isn't unique to this one, and that's going to be done, if it's coming through FHWA, it's going to be done throughout the nation, then that's what we live by for our safety factors in all roads and bridges. And we have weight limits for a reason. They keep vehicles and us safe, and they also maintain the life of the road, or whatever that is, the bridge, the facility, whatever. So when you say it's safe, but it's not safe, it kind of gets a little contradictory. So that bit on why it's different, an explanation on how the calculations took something that hasn't been damaged and said all of a sudden it's not capable of what it has been capable of. And maybe a little explanation on that fact. This is also to bring to us a little bit on how that changes without going through the actual math part of that, because I don't think we want to know that at all. But an explanation on that change. And if this is the case here, I'm assuming there's going to be a number of these bridges throughout our area, throughout the nation, that are going to have these kinds of situations. So that could get costly across a large area. It's a side note, I guess. So that's my thoughts. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Sheldon, can you speak to what it was, how much did it cost for the consultant to do these new calculations, and where that money comes from?
Money came from the street operating fund, professional services, from Public Works engineering budget. It was roughly $11,000.
Was it contemplated for the 2018 budget?
No, it was out of the 17 budget.
Okay.
The rest of our bridges, the calculations aren't due until the end of 2022.
So it was an unanticipated $11,000 out of the 2017 budget?
No, it was unanticipated, but we were able to fit it within the budget last year, and so we did it. We had it done.
Sure, that's what I mean. We
Yes.
took it out of there, but didn't know we were.
Yeah, we were able to shift some things around and get it done and stay within our fund budget.
If the other calculations aren't due until 2022, do you expect that there will be a number of bridges that will need to be reinforced when they come through with their new
I
calculations?
don't know until the calculations are done. Only one out of about 12 or 13 bridges showed the need this go round.
Okay.
And most of our bridges aren't constructed the way this one was.
Okay, so we have the project updates, and it sounds like, as you know, for this one, it came, I think, on short notice to us, but in the future with those, because now we know that one of these needed to be reinforced and it cost this much money, I think it would be good to have that as a project update, just to keep it on our radar that coming up in, or the council coming up in 2022, or whenever these kinds of, if there are other applicable situations where there's a consultant that's doing this kind of work that might have an amendment coming up.
Then we do standard bridge inspections constantly on a rotating basis. All these, our facilities are inspected always on rotating through every few years or so. Right?
We're required to inspect every bridge every 2 years. And about half our bridges get done 1 year and half the next, and you rotate through so that we don't have a seesaw of expenditures. We just keep it pretty constant for the bridge inspections.
So, are we ready to talk about moving forward? I hear that you've got some additional requests, and I agree with those requests. Sounds like you have kind of similar concerns. So, and this is, if it's going to be done this year and not waiting, it has to keep moving. We can't postpone it. So, are you okay with moving it forward to the August 6th council meeting, requesting that all these questions that we've brought up now be answered at that time and then deliberated then?
So are you suggesting that it would come forward with no committee recommendation? Or are you, so,
Or we could say, come forward with committee asking for additional information, because we've done that before, say we want additional information, and rather than make it go through infrastructure again and delay the project, we'll let that go to council and let that additional information be shared at that point. Because if we hold it up, it won't happen this year.
so I wasn't suggesting holding it up, thanks. What I'm saying is that I assumed that this needed to come to the full council whenever it's supposed to go, the next meeting perhaps, and that the committee was going to, there was going to be a motion about whether the committee recommends the council support it. I would not support that motion, but would keep an open mind at the full council and change my mind if we had additional information that satisfied me.
Okay. So wait, so you're okay with it going to the council? You're not recommending that it be with a no vote?
I would not recommend I could not support yes, I can make a motion if you want, but it would be from my perspective, and it sounds like you two wouldn't vote the way I would vote, so.
Well, why don't you do that? Because I think we'll go along with that. Tell us what your motion would be.
So I would not, see, this infrastructure committee does not recommend approval of so the committee recommends that it move forward to the full council, but not recommending approval unless additional information comes forward, that satisfactory information comes forward. I would have to.
That's perfect. That's what I thought you were saying. So that's what, so are you in that boat too? That I think we can say that is that we're sending it forward.
We need to write it down.
All right. We're sending it forward to requesting additional information. We're not requesting, it's not going forward with a recommendation to fund at this point.
Right.
So that additional information is.
And I think additional information added to the agenda bill itself is one of the
Okay.
needs.
So try this on for sides. A motion to recommend the agenda bill be presented to the full council with additional information and an expanded agenda bill to include the information requested.
Perfect. So you took out, and I'm okay with that, the way you wrote that, you took out the first we talked about not to fund, you just took that and said asking for additional information. I'm fine with that. That sounds better to me, actually.
What do you mean not to fund?
Originally we said going forward to the council with a recommendation not to fund, but requesting additional
I
information.
think I said not to support.
Yeah, but then I think
Yeah, so.
I'm in favor of that language.
Yes, read it one more time, please.
Yeah. You're still trying to type it in? Okay. I would make a motion to recommend, I would make a motion that the agenda bill
Maybe 7640.
be presented to the full council with additional information and an expanded agenda bill to include the information requested.
I didn't get the exact wording, but let me see if I caught your intent here. The agenda bill will be presented to full council with additional information which would be contained in the agenda bill. Did I miss
Sure, that's
any of your
fine.
intent, or if you want to?
That's fine.
If you want
Got
to give me,
questions in
if
there.
you want to correct my language, I'm good with that too.
It just should be with, say it again?
I said, the agenda bill will be presented to full council with additional information which would be contained in the agenda bill.
With the additional information requested.
With additional information requested. The agenda bill will be presented to full council with additional information requested, which would be contained in the agenda bill.
Yes. Or in, yeah. Put it in.
And that additional information included all her questions. We had questions on fish window as well.
I can send you a list, Sheldon. of what I
Please
asked.
do.
Sure.
I tried to capture them all, but I'm sure I'd probably give you a call and
Bless you.
ask for them again, just to make sure I get them all.
All right?
And I think there was also the questions about what the load limit actually
Right,
was. at
yeah.
the-
and those two.
Yeah, how the bridge was safe and now is not safe.
Right, but in actually, if you say when you post, what would that post actually say?
Right, what is the rating for the
Rating, yeah.
posting?
Yeah, according to the new
And so
calculation.
just a point of clarification, we've never said the bridge was not safe. I know it's confusing, but
You can't say that. If the numbers say it is, anyway, so you can say it's never been, it has not had any damage or anything, it's changed its structure.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, is that a?
So I made the motion, so I guess you have to call for the vote.
Okay, so call for the vote, as written and transcribed, and he's gotten down, and we'll make sure all those questions are in there so they have them. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks.
Okay, 3-0. All right. That item is done. We have one last item on the agenda, which is our standard project updates. And Sheldon's going to give us a quick, anything of, or Kurt, anything of highlights or mention, or any questions anybody has?
I didn't have anything special to highlight for you guys. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Anything, Kurt? No?
I have one question. We talked about the environmental mitigation site monitoring maintenance and the note that was that the 2018 budget is not adequate for work. And so I think so could you give an update on the status of that? Are we going to see information about how much that will cost?
Budget amendment, it'll be contained in the budget amendment request.
Okay.
I don't recall the exact dollars right now.
That was my question.
And the big project, can you talk to that? Do you have any opening dates yet?
No opening dates yet. We have what I'd say is our last high-risk item yet to build
Okay.
on the east side underneath the roundabout, and that's the replacement of the sanitary sewer. We're still working on that issue.
We're not necessarily replacing it, right? We're still working on that?
We're in a parallel path right now, negotiations, and the contractor is now moving to order the pipe and things like that because we are now at critical path on it. And that critical path could impact our paving capabilities because if the weather changes, it could affect our opening because we wouldn't be able to pave. So I'm kind of holding my lips tight a little bit.
So are you at liberty to, just for folks who are watching, because we haven't even mentioned the project and we haven't, this is very vague. So are you at liberty to do a very brief explanation about what project we're talking about and what issue we're talking about?
I'd be happy to. The project we're talking about is the Southeast 62nd Street Extension project. It began last March. It's about a $20 million construction contract, and it's been moving along quite well. We have some utility issues over on the east side at the intersection of 4th, 62nd, and 221st. And we're working through those utility issues with the utility district, Sammamish Plateau. And the discussion that's occurring right now is whether or not the district is going to require the replacement of their sanitary sewer, which is quite deep underneath our fills. Because we did a major preload in the area, the district is concerned with secondary consolidation. All the monitoring of that pipe showed that there was no movement in the pipe. We did a substantial TV inspection and pressure testing, and all of the information that came back was the pipe is in good condition and should be fine for a very long period of time. So we're in discussions right now with the district on whether or not we'll be able to enter into a relationship for long-term associated with the cost of replacing that pipe if it needs to before the end of its useful life.
And if we don't have to replace it now, because the tests that we've done show that it doesn't need to be replaced, then it saves both the district and the city money, correct?
That's correct. It will save each of us roughly around $180,000,
Okay.
assuming that it only costs $360 to replace it.
Okay.
But that's the estimate that we have right now.
Okay. And then did their board recently take a vote?
They took a vote back in July 2nd to say that they'd be interested in having the communications and negotiations with us. That's why we're in a parallel path right now. But once the contractor puts a shovel in the ground to start doing the work, then
We're there.
we're there.
Okay.
So the contractor in preparation, because we're on critical path schedule with it, they've done a test pit to see what kind of conditions they would expect to see on the south end of the property or on the south end of the line. And at the north end of the line, we'd done excavations for stormwater vaults and things like that, so we already knew what was there. The conditions vary, and there's risk associated with installation and replacement of that pipe.
Okay, well, we're excited for that project to be open at the end of the year, and it would be great to save some money, but it's not completely up to us. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. I was going to ask the same question to see if you had the same answer of end of the year. And just to mention, because I saw that I've seen some counters in alleys in Old Town. So it looks like people listen to some desires and some concerns, and cities taking action. So
Yeah, and so just as a follow-up to that, our plan currently is to put some counters out there now to get some data now, realizing that it's the middle of summer and conditions can be different after school starts, but then come back with a second set of counters this fall. Then we'll have two good data points to make some good decisions and recommendations back to council is our plan.
So thank you for taking that action. No other questions on project updates? With that, we are adjourned at, 7:47? Yeah, 7:47.